Tell me about a time where you were dissatisfied with the status quo, or you did something of your own responsibility. Hey everyone, I'm here today with Arvind. We're going to be doing a mock TPM interview from Amazon, where we'll be asking a behavioral interview question about ownership, one of the Amazon's leadership principles. In today's interview question, I'll be asking Arvind, tell me about a time where you challenged the status quo, where you took responsibility for a decision on your own. Before I jump into it, Arvind, could you introduce yourself briefly for folks watching?
Sure. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me today. I'm a senior TPM at Amazon. I work in the AWS business of Amazon. In my prior life, I used to work as a senior engineer at LexisNexis, which is more into the information research and the legal analytics side of the world. I also went back to school at Fuqua, so go Blue Devils, without a doubt. Spent a lot of time doing program management, project management, and also spent a lot of time being an engineer as well. That's about me in a nutshell. And if you have any specifics, please feel free to.
Awesome. Well, super excited to have you, Arvind. In today's interview, we're going to be focusing on the leadership principle of ownership. We're specifically going to be talking about the following question. Tell me about a time where you were dissatisfied with the status quo, or you did something of your own responsibility.
Sure. Thank you. Can I take like a few seconds to think through it and probably come back to you on it?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for that. I would like to take us back to like a few years ago, 2017, early 2017, when I joined this new team after being part of a different team wherein I was not only the technical lead, but also Scrum Master, wherein we tried to redefine the practice management side of things. But when I moved to this new team in 2017, I had an opportunity to work with amazing engineering minds who actually have been shepherding this process, are probably like working on this amazing CRM platform for a really long time, like almost 15 years. One thing that actually I quickly found out was their release management and deployment processes were not up to the mark. What I mean by that is, if you have a new code that actually was ready for deployment, or probably like when we were trying to take care of a customer request, the whole process used to take almost a good number of 6 to 8 weeks. And I quickly figured that this actually could be refined based on my previous experiences. However, it's not easy to navigate when you join a new team, right? So I took some time. For a period of like next 6 to 12 weeks, I worked with the people who are involved in the process. I was trying to be the listener on the calls. I probably just sit right around the people when they were doing it. I try to identify, write down the pain points that actually I have noticed from my firm beliefs, not something that actually I would say they actually felt the same way as well. So I took a step back. I figured that this needed actually a better plan, something actually that I could probably like streamline and put in a wiki or probably a document saying, hey, here's how we should be looking at a 3 or 2 years down the lane. So when I started actually putting the pieces of the puzzle together, I quickly understood that there is potentially a very good chance that we actually could have this deployment streamlined in a way that instead of taking that 6 weeks of deployment, we could have a process that literally could be simplified and we could have a deployment done within the same day. That's pretty much the situation and the actions that I took. And literally, this is where actually it moves from strategy to tactics, right? I had to work with the engineers as well as the DB people and pretty much everybody else involved in the process. I need to get the buy-in from people. I need to get the resources that are required. So that's something actually wherein I took a step back. I tried to come up with a plan. I worked with my architect who was super supportive of this idea because he and I actually in our previous lives, as in my previous project, we actually put this process together and this release mechanism together wherein things were so solid. So having worked with that architect for a while and putting the plan together, we literally came up with a simple step-by-step process so that we can get to the farther end. Like within the next 6 to 12 months, we are able to start putting the action plan together, and we started automating a bunch of these processes and enabling these people with the right skill sets as well as the right tools and everything. I would like to say probably like within 9 months timeline, we had our first deployment, which was totally automatic. Pretty much like wherein we had a very little amount of human involvement involved there. As in like all we had to do was take care of one particular process that we had to kick off, which we did not do. And we actually started putting the pieces together. And when we talk about 2019, that is where actually I could proudly say that by 2019, we were able to start deploying pretty much on like every time there's a code check-in that happens, we actually started seeing the flow happen seamlessly. And in simple words, if I were to quantify this impact, the thing that used to take 6 weeks actually can be done in one day right now. We actually kind of borrowed this model from Facebook's way of doing things, wherein we learned that they actually deploy more than twice or at least like 7 times a day, if I'm not wrong. So we tried to emulate something similar. So that's what we ended up doing. From a customer, looking back at like how customer would be impacted or probably benefit from this, it's more of like how many releases can a customer have within a given year. This very team in 2017 or prior to 2017, they used to have maybe like 3 or 4 deployments every year. From that, we actually moved to a state wherein we had 24 deployments in 2019. That probably speaks volumes about it.
Wow. Well, can definitely hear the impact there of your changes, Arvind. I'm curious, what was the reason that there weren't deployments before, or what sort of like challenges did you have to face when you were changing the status quo for that organization?
Sure. I think a wise man once told me that there are 3 things that actually impact any project, which is like people, the product itself, and probably the product itself, right? Like if at all you want to make any change, the product itself actually has to be, we should be able to do it. Like one of the elements that we had there was the on-premise side of things. We could never ever actually move that to a streamlined deployment process. But there was this cloud side of things wherein we could actually start putting these pieces together. However, it was not easy for us when we started the journey, which goes back to the second P, which is people. These are amazing people without any doubt. I am not going to disagree on any given day. But the reality is they have chosen to stay one way, or they have chosen to work one way. And it actually challenges their mental model. And it's not easy for anybody. Like, trust me, even when I am set in my mental model, I'll probably not operate the different way. It takes time for me wherein I have to challenge myself and try to make sure that I correct my understanding and go back to it. So working with people and trying to understand their intentions behind it and their intentions behind doing it the manual way, because they deemed actually doing it manually would actually allow the process of verification kick in. And with the process of verification, they always felt that level of confidence was close to like that 95%, but which could easily be even be supported by automatic deployments as well. So we had to put a process in place. We had to make sure that the product also scales along with us and also get the buy-in from the right set of people. One good thing, which actually I forgot to mention through this process, is there was change in leadership. The change in leadership also helped us. Back in the days when we had a leader who was supportive, but he was not willing to actually make these subtle changes that actually could change the culture within the team. The change in leadership also truly helped us.
Got it. Got it. We may not discuss this in an actual interview, but this interview is asking about ownership a lot. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you took on ownership, or maybe ways that you struggled with ownership in this particular example?
Sure, I could certainly do that. So let me go back to 2017. I actually just like joined this team. I was trying to make my mark. In the first 6 months, I could have just ramped up and probably like picked one of the items on sprint backlog, right? What I chose to rather do was not only do what I was supposed to do as an engineer on the team, I actually chose to even take a step back and sit down with this other engineers who are involved in this process, who are doing the manual deployments. I took time out of my plate, like out of my personal time. I sat down with them. I tried to understand what they were doing. And there are these 2 amazing engineers that we used to work with. These people actually shepherded the process pretty much for a while. They had a really good run book. But the reality is that run book was as good as like when they can run it. Because every time there was a need for refinement, we had to work with them. What I did was I took that ownership of like, this run book is great, but can we automate it in a way that actually we don't need a run book? So I took that ownership of like translating that run book into pretty much a scripted way of getting things done. It's pretty much like push a button and everything happens magically or automagically, however you want to say it.
Awesome. Well, that we're getting close to the end of this particular question, but is there anything else that you would have done differently or something you might have changed when you look back on this experience?
That's a really good one. Um, One thing that I think I could have done slightly better was actually trying to get in the buy-in from the engineers or probably like even from the leadership sooner than later. It goes back to what actually John Cotter talks about, right, in his Leading Change book. It's more of like providing that sense of urgency sooner than later. That's something that I lacked. I'll be honest, 2017, I was not as smart as I am today, hoping that I'm smart as of today. But the reality is, when I read that book, it actually reminded me the fact that when you want to change your environment, or probably like pretty much something which happens to be a cultural change within your team, you need to get the buy-in, and also you need to get it buy-in in a particular way that you not only are sending them the right signals, but also give them the sense of urgency of why this is important. And it was important for us to actually make that move because once we talk about the next example, you will actually figure out how I could tie the loose ends. That example's pretty much, it just like puts the pieces of the puzzle together for you. And when we get to that, we'll certainly understand it. But the reality is within like 2 to 3 years, we translated ourselves from a engineering group, which was actually shipping 4 times every year to pretty much like, yes, I have this feature ready. You need to just like switch this feature on, and once you switch that feature on, customers can see it like pretty much right away if you want them to. So
Totally.
it's the sense of urgency. I actually probably lacked that skill. I learned it over a period of time, and I'm still hoping that I'll be able to do it at Amazon as well. And thank you for asking that. Thank you.
Totally. Well, Arvind, we're wrapping up this particular interview. Is there anything else you want to say about the example or situation before we kind of jump to talk about feedback and how we felt like the interview went?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing it. We can take off the interviewee hat. You did a great job. It was really, really awesome. I have a lot of notes about what I thought were really effective about it. But before I say what I thought was really effective, did you have anything you wanted to share, more of like a self-reflection about how the interview was, or any thoughts on it?
Sure, I can certainly do that. Usually, I tend to use a scale so that it helps me improve my own practice. Or like when I practice, I used to do this. I used to ask anybody to rate me on a scale of 1 to 5. If you allow me to rate myself on a 1 to 5 here, I'll probably give myself a 2.5.
Hmm. Wow, that's much lower than I thought. But tell me more. What did you think went well, and what did you think you would improve?
I think what it did very well is actually talking about the situation, elaborating it, and probably like enumerating some of the actions that we took or I took as a individual. What I lacked in this particular example was I could have done slightly better when I tried to put the impact, that impact side of things. I don't think actually I did a really good job, but I could be wrong.
Hmm.
And I'm usually known for being very stern on myself.
Totally. Well, so here's what I thought you did really well and what I thought you would improve. So first of all, I thought the example that you picked was very palpably clear and very relevant to the ownership leadership principle, which is what we're targeting or talking about today. You moved a process that was a 6-week process to a 1-day process, and you changed a 3 to 4 deployment per year to a 24 deployment per year situation, which is very tangible and quantifiable, which is really awesome about this particular one. Not all answers have to be so quantifiable, but it helped and it built up the impact that I think you had on the team. I also thought you did a great job of discussing the elements that you needed to discuss without getting so technical that it might be irrelevant to me. So oftentimes people fall into the trap of just going on and on about a technical detail or something like that. You sort of stayed a little higher level, which was nice. And I certainly could have asked a little bit more, like, oh, what deployment, et cetera, et cetera. But it got me the information that I needed to interview you effectively, which I thought was really awesome. I thought that there was a really thoughtful discussion and really great responses to the follow-up questions that I asked. And so, I asked some pretty hard follow-up questions, or maybe ones that you might not have expected, or kind of took it in different directions, like what would you do differently, or things like that. And I thought you handled them with grace. You always were like, "This is a great question. Here's how I would change it." So I thought that was all really effective. I think, like, in terms of feedback, I think there was probably some opportunity to interact with me a little bit more, or ask, like, do I know this thing, or this is kind of the situation, or even you did this a little bit toward the end. You mentioned like 2 engineers you worked with that were really great. Even bringing in a little more of your emotional perspective, or it was really hard, or it was really awesome, or et cetera, can kind of humanize you and humanize the process, because at the end of the day, these are behavioral interview questions. And so the interviewer is not only looking for the content of what you say, but also just, your pleasantness as a person to work with, and maybe just your emotional candidness throughout that interview answer. But anyways, any other thoughts, reactions to what I just shared, or any other tips that you want to share to folks watching?
I think I missed on one thing when you asked me earlier if there is anything that I would like to add. That actually goes back to being able to provide a nugget. What I mean by a
Mm.
nugget is, I heard this somewhere and probably read in a book as well. When you talk about a behavioral situation, it's recommended actually provide a 15-second nugget saying, "Hey, here is what I want to talk to you about. Is this of any importance to you or any interest to you?" If you actually ask that to the interviewer, you kind of captivate them within that 15 to 20 seconds. And that also gives them a simple understanding, probably a very simple way of understanding like what the problem is about or what the situation is about, so that actually they can starting writing their notes, and probably like even start picking what they want to ask for. That's something that I have utilized actually through my process, and even during my Amazon interview. I forgot to mention that. I'm extremely sorry for it.
No, no, I love that. That's a great point. Yeah, is there anything else you want to share with folks watching before we wrap up this particular interview?
And thanks for the feedback. Yes, I agree with you mostly, pretty much with what you said. I could have tried to humanize my experiences there. I'm sorry I did it.
No, I yeah, totally. Overall, Arvin, I think this is an amazing interview, by the way, and I think you did an excellent job of articulating your points. And I think there's a lot of self-awareness and that you have, which also adds to kind of the effectiveness of the interview that you have. So I thought this was an amazing example. And again, I wanted to thank you, Arvin, for taking the time to interview with us. And for folks watching, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let us know in the comments below, and Arvin and I will both help out to answer any questions.